back to GTD, first virtual video of the summer, as we are no longer in Auburn, Alabama following the end of the school year, but still going to keep content coming out over the summer. And we're starting with the NASCAR All-Star Race, which I think I was very happy with. I don't know what your thoughts on it were, Keegan, but as far as a short track next gen race especially, I think this definitely over-delivered. There was great side-by-side racing for most of the race, I feel, and I was very entertained. Obviously, Christopher Bell coming out on top in his 4th win of the season, and obviously this one doesn't count towards the playoffs, but still, 20 cars showing some good speed once again. What'd you think of the All-Star race?
Yeah, going into it, I was kind of like, short track this year hasn't been great. I remember the All-Star race last year had a lot of, I don't know if the racing was great, but it had a lot of drama, so it made the race interesting, especially with Stenhouse and Busch early on, and that kind of continued throughout the night. So I was just kind of going into it like, it's just going to be a week where we just watch and, move on to the next one. But then I watched the Open, and I was like, okay, these guys like this track. These guys are racing. I mean, they're having fun. So I was like, all right, I'm ready for the All-Star race. And it happened, and I was like, it delivered. I mean, I think it's Bristol, Martinsville's been pretty good over the last few years, and I think this track races not similar to Martinsville because it's very different ways you pass, but I think as far as entertainment level in this next gen era, it's up there with Martinsville, and then that one Bristol is an outlier. But I think I would rather see this over Richmond on the schedule, if being honest.
Yeah, and I mean, we did get the good finish to Richmond last year, but there were option tires in that race. There were other things thrown in. Austin Dillon decided to do some interesting things in that race as well. But I was very happy with the racing. You mentioned you pass in such a different way here to the other short tracks in NASCAR where you just hang it out on the outside. I feel like this is kind of what people think Bristol could be, where you have the one car on the outside that's able to maintain, and the inside line can work if you're able to slide job. It kind of felt like old school style of Bristol racing, even though the tracks and the speeds are obviously very different. But I want to talk about the promoter's caution for a second here. And
let's do it.
I didn't like the huge double box for so long. I felt, especially with Kyle Larson literally in the wall, and we're staring at Michael Waltrip doing this to the crowd, like, am I going to throw it? And then the gimmick of throws the yellow flag onto the track, and there are fireworks. I'm like, okay, at what point are we just I kind of agree. I don't know if what you saw what Jeff Gluck said on this on the teardown, but I kind of agree that at what point are we just making a joke of an all-star event? I get there being gimmicks in the event, but we're treating it like a joke, honestly, at this point. I think that if you're going to have built-in cautions, just do it and do a shootout to the end. If you want to experiment with stuff, experiment with changing the actual car in the race. I don't want to see any nonsense, for lack of a better word. It just felt a little ridiculous.
Well, to NASCAR's credit, they did try to bring car modifications to the race, and all the teams, not NASCAR, were like, we're good, bro. So I will say that for NASCAR. So they had to think of something.
Fair point.
And as far as the promoter's caution goes, as a guy who's been to a lot of local short tracks and they can get boring, you're just kind of waiting for one of those, 20-year-old drivers who's been out there for 2 races before just to kind of spin it in a corner to re-rack them. I'm okay with the promoter's caution, especially with what we've seen at short track racing. Yeah, especially with what we've seen at short tracks this year. I would have liked some promoter's cautions at some other short track races this season. So I don't hate that at all. I'm with you, though. Maybe give them competition caution at lap. You don't want to say 50 to go at a track like North Wilkesboro, but at whatever lap. Or just say it'll be at this lap or not, instead of maybe in this window or not. And I think, if you're going to do the promoter's caution,
it late in the window.
Right. And if you're going to do it, don't make it obvious. If you talk about the side-by-side, I mean, I think Michael Waltrip wanted to throw it maybe 10 laps earlier than he did, but you can see the NASCAR officials just kind of keeping him in the back of the boot or box, just saying 5 more, bro. They made it the most obvious. If you're a crew chief, you know when it's coming because the NASCAR officials were counting down the laps going, it's coming. But honestly, with the fireworks, I'm glad you brought that up. I think with all the feedback from fans, like real racing fans and the old school NASCAR fans and the drivers themselves that hated it, I think NASCAR kind of pulled one over on them and was like, oh, they don't like this. Watch this. We're really going to get on their nerves. I think that was honestly, that was a good move by NASCAR. That was pretty funny for me.
Okay, I can maybe see the funny side of it. I just think if we're having an all-star event, let's put the focus on the drivers and not infighting within the teams in NASCAR. But I kind of want to segue to this into the all-star format itself because I thought it was decent this year. The Open you mentioned ran especially well, and then the actual all-star race. There was a period of about 60 laps, I think, towards the end of the lap 100s, that kind of area, where it started to get a little bit single file. But other than that, it felt like a good competitive race. I will say, I think people are still throwing around the idea of an invert. I think that could be fun to see, especially to short track at some point. But other than that, and I think you would do that kind of maybe right in the middle, obviously, but other than that, aside from going back to some of the older things we've already seen with the shootouts and only green flag laps count, I didn't have much to complain about in this one, honestly. It felt pretty solid.
Yeah, I really like the green flag lap count thing, and I know that the ruling, we didn't get to see this, but the ruling was no finish under yellow. Like the winner has to take the checkered flag under green, which if we were to come to that would have been a great thing to have, and I think something that should be thing anyways. But I think as far as if you're taking things from the past that you can kind of bring in, this isn't really a format thing, but I'd like to see the underglow return, but not the manufacturer like weird LED strips on some 13-year-old bedroom's wall. I want like the ones they ran at Las Vegas, not the track, but down the strip in like Nashville, like probably 5 years ago that they just did burnouts in. That was real underglow, like you'd see just cruising down Miami or Los Angeles on like some old school like Lower Del Camino. That's what they need to bring back, because I think that would really look really cool on a short track at night.
Yeah, and there's your light effect too, NASCAR. If you're thinking about that, perfect light effect right there for the underglow. But I think it's time to talk about Joey Logano now. And he had the fastest car. I think we both agree. He had the fastest car in this race, spent most of it up front, just like last year, after finally getting by Brad Keselowski, who we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But towards the end of the race, Christopher Bell, they're right next to each other. Logano kind of shoves him down, then uses him up a little bit, doesn't really give him a bunch of room. Christopher Bell, in my opinion, goes, okay, I'm going to race you like you raced me.
Annihilated him. Put him into the
fence.
Unacceptable.
Yeah. It was
unacceptable.
Obviously a disgusting act from Christopher Bell. Slightly washed up the track. And I think everyone is kind of looking at this going, okay, Joey, if you did that kind of move, it's the classic Denny Hamlin, that's just short track racing, like that kind of Joey Logano back on the old Martinsville races. And I don't get why he is so bent out of shape about this. And then mad at the promoter's caution too. Like, Joey, did you not read everything in the months up in advance of the All-Star race saying the promoter's caution was going to happen? I mean, he seemed totally disconnected from what was going on in anything in this race. Maybe just because he's so far out in the lead, forgot about everything else. But I think absolutely fair from Christopher Bell. Joey Logano raced him just as hard, if not harder, and I don't see a problem with it at all, frankly. And I think Christopher Bell felt the same way, because he came back at Joey Logano yesterday, or today actually, and said, well, Joey's done much worse than that, and I would agree with that too. So I think props Christopher Bell, made the move when it mattered. Obviously had some fresher tires, but that's the 22 team's fault for leaving Joey out there on it, and I think pretty much anyone could have told you that was a bad idea after what you saw through the middle of this race.
Yeah, everything you said about Christopher Bell's move on Joey Logano, 100%. I agree with. I think everyone who watched agree with. I don't think anybody but Joey Logano disagrees with it. My thing about Joey Logano complaining is, and I texted you this right when they were doing his interview. Yes, you can get mad at the promoter's caution all you want. You're the one who is behind the wheel and decided not to go down pit road when everyone behind you, except another Penske guy, went down pit road. So, I mean, who's really at fault here? You could have gone and got tires. Like, this isn't like because you got passed. Like, you could have gone and got tires. Like, I don't get what he has to complain about. Like, you were on older tires. Even if Bell didn't use you up then, he was going to get past you eventually. And I think that's something the promoter's caution has distracted from this race, was how good the strategy was. This is probably the best tire strategy race I've seen in a while. You had guys stay out. You had two tires. You had 4 tires. I mean, as far as the differing strategies and how they worked and played was beautiful, especially with like some of the competition cautions and in the real race, you'll have stage breaks and you can kind of leverage like a 30 lap shootout versus like a 90 to 120 lap shootout. It was beautiful, and I want to see more of this.
Yeah, it was absolutely great. I think this is short track racing pretty much at its best with the next gen car. I hate throwing that caveat on there because I don't want to sound like I'm complaining despite a good race, but I think that's the reality. Is this is near the peak of short track racing with the current package, and it was a great race. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And before we kind of move on from it, we said we'd talk about Brad Keselowski, and goodness, what a weekend for RFK. First off, Ryan Preece just forgets how to go through the choose cone area, and I know he's upset about it. I think he's honestly more upset at himself and just looking to project it because there's clearly signs on the side of the catch fence there. Like, you know how a choose cone works. No matter how much rubber's over it, you know where it is. And he was clearly down at the bottom of the track, then swerved back up for no reason, drove right over it. I don't get what he was doing. Chris Buescher had the incident where he was in the wall in the heat races, and they got to use that Band-Aid bear bond, which is pretty nice. And then, obviously, in the main, Brad Keselowski starts on pole, dominated really the first portion of this race. Then once he started to slip back, just really could never recover, ended up overdriving it, getting into the wall, and hopping his way down pit road. And if that just isn't the 6-car season in a span of about 25 laps, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I was really hoping and thinking, okay, this is gonna be a great weekend for them. Yes, it doesn't help you in the point situation, and you don't get the standings boost, and you don't get blah 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 blah. But momentum's as big as any sport in NASCAR. You saw it with Joey Logano, especially winning the championship last year. Ryan Blaney's huge on momentum. When he gets hot, he tends to stay hot until the season ends, and sometimes that can happen as late as August with him. So I think momentum's huge in the sport, and they were really close to capturing some very valuable momentum. Well, hell, I mean, Joey Logano last year did nothing until he won the All-Star race, and then you saw what happened. Ended up winning the championship,
Yeah.
like I said. So could have been a great thing for Brad Keselowski, but I still think there's a little momentum there just because of the domination pre-race, with the heat race and winning pole and all that stuff. So that's still, I think you can carry that on your shoulder, but what a tough break for that 16.
Yeah, for sure. But like we said a couple times now, overall, very solid all-star race. Is there anything else you wanted to hit on before we kind of got out of here and moved on to the 600 for the next episode?
Yes, Micah. Does North Wilkesboro deserve a points race? Is the question they asked all the drivers post-race, and now I'm asking you.
You're right. I think yes. I think I've seen enough now that it definitely deserves a points race. The big question is, what does it replace? Because now with Richmond only having one date towards the end of the year, I think it's hard to find that other track to boot off. I think maybe if you see a road course that starts to struggle, maybe Chicago falls through for the street race and Chicagoland Speedway doesn't come back. Maybe that's a weekend you find. I don't know, but I definitely think they need to find one because I've been very impressed with North Wilkesboro. The crowd's still showing up after 3 years, and I think they deserve a points race.
Yeah, I do as well. I don't. You mentioned what does it replace? I think if it does become a points race, you see another track take the All-Star weekend. So I don't know. I don't know what track that would be. You're not going to do a Richmond or Dover, you're not going to take a Bristol
Texas
date for that. I mean, they've been there before for the All-Star race. It's a NASCAR owned track. But I don't know. I'm glad you mentioned Chicago because you don't know this. I'm telling you this now. I will be there. I will be in Chicago July 4th weekend. So I'll be going to some Cubs games, and yeah. So I'm excited to see that race in person. I'm hoping it doesn't rain. It's rained every year so far. So we're hoping we actually get to see a dry Chicago street course. But I would, with the amount of gimmicks NASCAR has been tossing around as far as All-Star things recently, I think there's a road course in the All-Star future, especially with guys like SVG joining the sport. And Connor Zilic is great at road courses. I think that may happen. Just a one-off, not a steady thing.
I think there's no shot, even if they go to a rotation, they'd ever take it to a road course, just because the All-Star Race has always worked best, where it's at a core NASCAR fan base on or at night. Like you look at the Charlotte All-Star races were great. North Wilkesboro has been incredible. Bristol was kind of and then you saw as soon as they took it to Texas, it was a dud. So I think they're going to keep it in like a core NASCAR track for sure. But I do think North Wilkesboro deserves a points race. Though.
Let me ask you one more question.
Pretty much it for all. Oh, one more question. Full of them today.
Yeah. Would you rather, since I mentioned the road course, would you rather the All-Star break or All-Star race be the Charlotte Roval and have 2 Charlotte Oval dates, or like do you think that, like, are you okay with that?
To get another Charlotte Oval back in the regular schedule, sure, but like, I'm very much with Brad Keselowski on the Roval. Get it out of here.
No more. All right, I'm done. I have no more questions. You can close the episode out.
Yeah. All right. No more questions from Keegan. We're hitting the intro or the outro for the 3rd time here. It's 10 p.m. on a Monday. Give me a break. But also, last race for Fox Sports on the season, as yet another year of Fox Sports comes to an end, and NASCAR moves to Prime.
It was on Prime
for the first time ever. But we'll have more on. Have more on Prime and more on the 600 later this week. So make sure you guys are tuned in for that. But for now. He's been Keegan. I've been Micah. This has been GTD. We'll see you guys later in the week.